We beat ourselves up sometimes over wherever we are in a given moment, and just to allow yourself to be there. And I think creativity does that. If we're able to just say, okay, here's where I am as a maker, as an artist, but this is where I am, and I'm going to be here, and I'm going to look for where's the beauty right here, if it isn't all that evident.
Welcome to the Origins of Creativity podcast, brought to you by Bookling Media, where we discover the magic behind creativity through the stories of passionate creators. Listen in and fill your creative vessel with delightful insights and uplifting tales.
In this episode, our guest shares how weaving became both a creative outlet and an emotional support. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app. This way, you won't miss the next episode, and it helps others find us. Our guest today is an artist who is endlessly curious about all things drawing, painting, and fiber arts. Currently, she fills sketchbooks with drawings from her daily world, creates images in woven tapestry, and illustrates stories she has written. She has worked as a professional artist and art teacher for over 25 years. She is an active member of the Almond Tree Artist Collective and Tapestry Weavers South. Thank you for joining me today on the show, Jennifer Edwards.
Thank you. Thank you, Becky, so much for asking me to be here. I'm really excited about it.
Absolutely. I was drawn to your fiber art that you've posted on Instagram and just found it very appealing and real. You know, I guess that's the good word, real and raw. And it speaks a lot, I think, to your audience and to me. And hopefully, since this is audio only, when we get to it, we can kind of describe a little bit about what you do and, what's your process and all that. So to get started, I wanted to know what drew you into the arts and in particular fiber art.
Well, the fiber arts actually arrived pretty late in my artistic journey. I, of course, as a child loved drawing, painting, filling sketchbooks, writing little stories, knitting, crocheting alongside of my mom, just being a maker in general, but got into painting and drawing and selling those works, exhibiting them when I was in my 30s, and becoming a portrait artist, landscape, just exploring all of it and exhibiting that in and around our area. And alongside of that, always knitting, having yarn and my needles, crochet, whatever, just making things, whether it was sweaters for my kids or mittens and hats or gifts to give at Christmas time. I just loved yarn, and my mom did too. So I know that's where I got the love for yarn. And it wasn't really, you were mentioning this idea of how teaching and our creative practice, it kind of informs each other. But for many years, I was fortunate enough to teach out of a yarn shop. And so I taught knitters, crocheters, all different levels, beginners to experienced, and loved doing that. And it was during those years that I met other women who had other interests and expertise in different areas of the fiber world. And they would come to learn knitting, or they might come to learn how to crochet. But one woman in particular was a spinner. And so she said to me one time in one of our classes, she was like, Jennifer, I think you'd really enjoy learning how to spin. And I was like, no, I can't add another thing, to what I love to do. And especially, I don't want to move in another piece of furniture.
Right.
Because
spinning wheels are big, right?
Yeah, well, I thought that it would be. And she was like, well, you do know that you can spin on this little thing called a spindle. And I was like, ooh, tell me about that,
Okay.
And that was the gateway into spinning, which, I've spun on a spindle for a long time. And then I just had to have that wheel. And now I have 2 spinning wheels.
Oh, wow.
spinning, alongside of the knitting and crochet became this great love, and was a very soothing, meditative process that, I spin as much as I possibly can. And then another woman in my ongoing classes, she knew that I was an artist, a painter, drawing. She was like, Jennifer, I have seen people who weave pictures. And I was like, really? I hadn't really heard of this other than historical tapestries that you would hang, that you see hung on walls that are massive and took years and years to create. But she said, no, they put a picture behind the warp threads and then they weave that picture. And that was intriguing. I kind of logged that in the back of my head. It was probably, 9 years ago. My mom and I grew up in Boone, North Carolina, in the mountains of North Carolina, and the Moses Cone Manor is there on the parkway, and they have demonstration days out on their front porch for artisans to come.
Oh, nice.
And there was a woman there named Sandy Adair who had her tapestry weavings. And Mom and I were just enthralled. Mom was in the beginnings of her journey in Alzheimer's. And so I was fascinated by this woman's ability to translate basically the Blue Ridge Mountains that I grew up in into yarns.
Oh, wow.
And she would take a little photograph. She had been doing this all of her life. She was a career tapestry weaver. And she would take a little photograph that someone had given her. They were commissioning her to basically paint with yarn an image of a special place to them in the mountains. And it was just fascinating to me.
Wow.
I had no clue, how to go about it really. But again, that was an experience that I just kind of tucked it into the back of my mind. And I think it was 2 years later that I got into, it was over the holidays, I got into, for the first time in weaving, wall hangings. So there was a gal out there, Hello Hydrangea was her Instagram handle, and she was offering these very, easy to follow courses online for how to learn to warp a loom and to weave. And this was with chunky yarns, really thick stuff and beautiful wall hangings. And I was so fascinated by that process and wanting to learn all of it that by Easter, I started a series of Lenten weavings.
Oh my goodness.
To have one per week to hang in our church gallery.
Wow.
And so by the end of Lent and through Easter, there were 3 weavings through Easter. I had this whole series, each one depicting some very simple image that had to do with the Lenten journey. So I was hooked by that time. And then it was like, another way to use the yarn that I love, to knit, to crochet, to spin now. And here is weaving. So of course, I had to deep dive into weaving cloth.
Oh, right.
Which is just another fascinating avenue. I got a rigid heddle loom, which is, again, like a spindle. It's a small little version that doesn't require you to bring in a huge loom,
Sure.
that takes up your whole studio. But I did eventually get the loom. It was a smaller one called a Saori loom, which is a Japanese-made loom. And I fell down into a rabbit hole, all about Saori weaving, which is completely about freedom. And I think that's one thing that I've prized in all of art making is just the freedom to be able to create and to create in whatever way you want to create.
What do they mean by freedom? Are they, is it a design choice or is it something else entirely?
So I'll try to give a brief history of that because the woman who started that, named Misao Jo, she has since passed away over the last few years, but she was a weaver, a technical, master weaver. And at the time, years ago, apparently they would take their weavings. And if you can imagine the type of weaving that uses multiple shafts and you end up with these gorgeous patterns, floral patterns on the loom, all of this. There's a lot to describe there as to how that happens, but you have to have at least 4 shafts, which is the way that the threads are pulled through the loom, and your feet can press one shaft up, another shaft down, in order to create these patterns. So it's a very intricate way of creating and precise. You follow a prescribed regimen or rhythm of your feet and which pedals you're pushing to
like a
create
dance.
that. It is very much like a dance. And they would take their weavings, this is back in the day in Japan, somewhere to be inspected. And if they passed inspection, then they could go on to be sold. And then Misaojo and all the other weavers would be paid. But one time she took her weavings and one little skip in a thread was noticed, and she was told she couldn't sell that.
Oh, wow.
And it just began to get in her mind that, I'm not a machine. I'm a human being.
Right.
And humans make mistakes every now and then, And that started her on this journey of kind of stripping down her loom to only 2 shafts.
Okay.
Which is basically what weavers call plain weave. And that is, one shaft going up for one thread to pass through, then the other shaft comes up for another thread to come through. And she would just change up yarns, fibers, ribbons. They call them treasures, little extra bits that you throw in. Yeah, very fascinating and so much fun to do.
So they're giving that control of, their design and bringing the humanity back into it sounds like, and making it unique. And I like that. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And so anyway, cloth then led me into this, I've always loved making images. I keep sketchbooks. I have tons of sketchbooks and love drawing my everyday life and whatever fascinates me. And I wonder if I could translate some of those drawings into, a woven image that uses the yarn that I love and the yarn that I love to spin. And that journey started, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little bit more. But it seemed very natural to do that.
It sounds like you're blending all of the things you love right into like this conglomeration of, this is amazing to do all this at once.
Yes, to kind of sit in front of a loom and feel like all the things you love are coming to play right here,
Nice. Yeah.
So one of the things we do as tapestry weavers is we place what's called a cartoon behind the warp. So technical terms, the warp threads are the ones going vertically.
Okay.
And they are under tension. And in tapestry, it's probably the highest tension. In cloth weaving, you have to have it under tension as well, but it's maybe a little less so.
Okay.
And then you have weft. Weft are the yarns that you're using to go over, under, back and forth horizontally.
Okay.
And then you've got this idea that you have to start from the bottom. So it's very different from painting.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I know you're familiar with, Becky, where when I have a sketchbook or a painting in front of me, I could start at the upper right-hand corner if I wanted to.
Sure, yeah.
I could start right in the middle. But with tapestry, typically, you're starting at the bottom, and you're also packing that weft in. In general, not all tapestry weavers pack it all in quite so much, but in general, you're covering the warp.
Yeah.
So that the warp disappears, and you only have, it's called a weft-faced structure. That's what tapestry weaving is typically thought of. Whereas with cloth, if you look at woven cloth, your warp and your weft, both of them are seen.
Okay.
Both of them are visually evident to the person seeing it. Woven wall hangings can have an interplay of whether it's weft-faced or warp-faced. Okay. So anyway, these are all technical terms.
Oh, no, that's so fascinating. And I'm imagining, those tapestries also, on the castle walls. And it also is making me wonder for you, it's such a traditional art medium, especially for, I'm not sure if I know any male tapestry workers. I'm sure there are, but how is that for you, where it's like this traditional thing? Does it like ground you in some sort of, you feeling your roots, you're feeling, where we've come from, and just getting your hands back into the fibers. Something about that makes me feel like I would view that way.
Yes, that is very much a sense or a feeling that I've had for many years with knitting. Because you think about the knoll binding that goes back to Egypt,
Sure,
which is the precursor to knitting, and then the Norwegians and people from all over the world who have brought such history of knitting to that craft. Yeah. And then, oh yes, the tapestry weaving, incredible works where you're going back and learning that they too spun their own wool, dyed it naturally. A lot of these are, natural dyes that they would use to create the colors in their tapestries, and they were fairly limited in what colors that they had. Whereas nowadays we have synthetic dyes that can give us just about every color we could imagine. But yes, that is that whole idea of women's work is really grounding for me. Although you do find, as you read about these histories, that in some cultures, even in Europe, men were apprenticed as knitters and apprenticed as tapestry weavers, that they were, before the Industrial Revolution, this was in general men's work, and they were paid a fair wage for. Wow. And then machines took over. The guys, the men no longer had a supporting wage, for hand knitting or weaving. All of it was being done on machines. So then the women kind of took that up. Now that's not necessarily completely true. Women were always knitting, always weaving, And of course, in different cultures, like you've got Navajo weaving, where the women, that was very much their work. You have rugs in Iran, and just those amazing works of art, really, that are called rugs.
Right.
Yeah, but that's very much something I think about with all that I love to do. My kids tease me sometimes that everything I enjoy doing is like back from the medieval ages. And I always say to them, well, when the electricity goes out, I still have fun because I can spin and knit and, of course, if I have a candle.
Sure, right. You can make blankets or anything else that you wanted to do with it.
That's right. A loom doesn't, at least my looms don't operate on electricity. There are some looms that do, production looms, but...
Are there any pieces that, as you've created, have any just like really stood out to you or your audience that, struck a chord with them in particular?
Well, I'm going to think in terms of just my brief tapestry. Yeah, sure. And I do, Becky, still feel like I'm a newbie in this tapestry world. And the women that I so look up to and revere online, as well as some that I've been fortunate to meet, one woman in particular, Tommy Scanlon, I've had a 2-day class workshop with her, and she continues to be an encouraging factor, in my tapestry journey. Anyway, I feel very young as far as being a tapestry weaver. So I think I've said to folks that tapestry and I have a tumultuous history, although brief. And one of the reasons is that it takes so long to weave an image that's like 8 by 10.
Sure.
And I can crank out a drawing in a fraction of the time that it takes. And that is both something that I have been really frustrated with, and is also the thing that I love about it. Mm-hmm.
Is it the process of doing that, or the results, or everything?
I think the thing I love about it is that it forces me to slow down. It forces me, to just sit there, and the time it takes to pull your warp threads out, weave the weft in, you're able to percolate, and think about okay, what color's coming next? And, oh, I've got to weave this first in order to be able to get to that leaf, or whatever it is. Whereas in painting and drawing, I'm a bit wild and, I just love to get the lines down and splash the watercolor in. And of course that has its place, but I have camped out in that ability to draw or paint somewhat quickly, and tapestry just makes me really sit with it and consider.
Which is, amazing for the brain and stress. And, even though it can be stressful sometimes, like what comes next? Did I make a mistake? But that slowing down. And I'm finding that a lot of creatives find that is equally as rewarding as the process and end result, perhaps, so that's really, really fascinating to hear that too.
I think that one of the very meaningful ones that I was really happy to be able to have a solo show for them were my waves tapestries. So these were, and I'll tell a little bit of the story. My mom had been on her Alzheimer's journey for 6 years before we needed to place her in memory care. And that was 3.5 years ago. And something about that event of moving her into memory care really undid me. And, I'm still unpacking all of why that was, and it's been difficult but fruitful.
Sure.
But somehow you think when you're placing your loved one in memory care that you're placing them in a place that they will be really cared for, safe, kept safe. And it didn't quite end up that way. We almost ended up having more issues to deal with in the year and a half or so following moving her in. And it was really consuming. And so I felt like I couldn't weave. I was barely drawing. And yet I wanted to be doing something that was meditative or just soothing. And I was spinning a lot. So I had all these yarns. It's like, what am I going to do? And I'd sold a bunch of them on Etsy, but you still end up with a lot. So I got this idea, and it's basically born out of a practice of mindfulness meditation that I have had for many years, of weaving the same thing over and over with slight variations to it. And the idea that I got was to weave a wave, or maybe 2 waves in an ocean, with a small round circle that would denote me, or where I am in any given moment in that wave or in relation to that wave. There would be sky and a horizon line. And these were tiny. These were like 3 inch by 3 inch. And I wove with a very small set. And the set refers to how close the warp threads are together. So, woven wall hangings, you can have a pretty wide set for your warp because you're using chunky yarns. But I was using hand spun that was about a fingering to DK weight. And so I had a set of around 10 warp threads per inch.
Oh gosh.
So, you're able to do more within that small kind of a set. And I just sat and drew, each day I would think, okay, where am I right now? What am I feeling? Well, I feel like the little round circle that I am just about getting to be engulfed by this wave. So I tried to draw that wave and that little circle. And then I would ask, okay, what color is this wave? This wave is so blue, it's almost black. I mean, so dark.
Yeah.
Feeling and brooding and consuming. What color am I in it? And like I could imagine myself drained of color. So I was a cool color, or pale. Yeah. And what color is the sky? The sky is dark. That might be, I'd go through all that process for one little tapestry. And then another one might be, well, what is today? What is this moment? Oh, well, I actually think I'm kind of on the top of this wave right now. It's going okay. I'm riding it. Do you see?
Absolutely.
Do you see the process I was going through for each and every depiction? And I ended up with, I think, 12 of those, although I could have woven many more. And it's wild how when you're in that creative process, you yourself are being taught. I mean, somehow wisdom just begins to come to you. And I began to realize, as I thought about these waves, that we're really all in the same boat together. And I had all these quotes that were coming to mind, and I'd go, trying to find who said that, and created a little book that people could purchase at the show. And I think that series has been the most meaningful. The 13th tapestry was the larger one, of two waves forming the prow and stern of a boat. And then multiple circles, like one would be you, one would be me, one would be a friend, Yes. And then there's an oar in the boat, and that represents. I am a person of faith, and I definitely believe that God is, for lack of a better term, rowing our boats.
Right, that's beautiful.
And he takes us into really strange and dangerous and hard waters.
Well, that is amazing, because it reminds me of all of the other, religious tapestries. You mentioned Native American pieces and how they can share their faith visually, and it's a great gift that we have of these pieces and your pieces, to be able to share that with others. And for them to pause and look at that, and it's different. And like you said, for yourself, people could, go to talk to somebody in therapy. People often forget that they can be creative to heal and pause and slow down through it, instead of just, let's rush to get the answer. I want to rush through this to get through this. And part of living, from what I'm seeing here, is, the troubles, the hard parts can be beautiful in their own sense and can be felt. So I think that I can see how that really could be something that people would connect with.
What was interesting during the show itself, and I created it in a way that there was a dialogue between those who attended and myself. And I gave them a template with a wave and a small circle, and to draw and to color in, where are you in something that's going on, and I said, just have no judgment about it. Don't be upset with yourself that you're feeling completely engulfed by this wave. Don't be like, oh, I really should have my head above water, because there's one of mine where the little round circle is just almost completely underwater. So it's right. We beat ourselves up sometimes over wherever we are in a given moment, and just to allow yourself to be there. And I think creativity does that. If we're able to just say, okay, here's where I am as a maker, as an artist, but this is where I am, and I'm going to be here, and I'm going to look for where's the beauty right here, if it isn't all that evident.
No, that's perfect. Especially, this day and age where we have things where we're, competing, it feels like, with everything else and all the noise, and to have it just be for you, and then it can be then for somebody else after the fact, but it's kind of like the air comes down in an airplane, that you have to give that to yourself first, and then you can, help others.
Oh, I like that.
And that feels like this, like you need to do it for you and then help others in that regard. And I think it's really hard right now. I think everybody's feeling that pressure to produce, everything is so mass produced right now that, if it's taking that long to do a piece, it's got to be special. And it does become that. And I think people will start to maybe, recognize and kind of appreciate that more as AI comes around and things, it's like, wow, this is done by somebody, this was their thought, their feelings. So, you shared so much about what has inspired you and how teaching has impacted you. What finally pushes you to create? Is it those moments, like you were saying, where you just need to express this feeling somehow? Or is it sometimes just, I want to just do it? Is there that balance between the two?
Part of me wants to say that I have an ongoing practice of making, regardless of what it is. I many years ago got a hold of Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way.
Oh, yes.
I think it was in my early 30s when that came out, and a good friend of mine went through it. And she has this way of encouraging you to just show up. Show up at the page, show up at the sketchbook, show up at the loom, show up at the knitting needles. I mean, for no reason other than I'm here, I'm going to write, or I'm going to spin. It's so funny on Instagram. I will post some of the yarns that I spin, and inevitably there's a question, oh, what are you spinning this for? I hadn't even thought about it. I'm just spinning. I'm just making most of the time, just because. Just because I love to. Because I don't have any thoughts that I could sell it, that would it be sellable? Would anybody want this? It's in me. I want to be doing this, And so I'll create ways in my life to make that easier to access, if this makes any sense.
Sure.
So in raising my children, when they were young, I had a sketchbook in the glove box. I had one in my purse or in their diaper bag or, every soccer practice, I was pulling out my sketchbook to draw whatever I saw around me, waiting in the line to pick them up from school, going to swim lessons, wherever it was. My husband's a pastor. He's okay with this, but I sketch and draw sometimes in the church service.
That's funny.
So, just little ways that you can take what you love to make with you. Of course, taking my knitting bag along with me, whatever projects I have going. Sock knitting is one of the best things to take along. It's small, portable, pull it out. Maybe you get caught in a meeting or something that,
right, instead of just pulling out that phone,
you need to have something to focus.
You're creating.
Yes.
You're right. You're not consuming.
Yes, you're making.
Yeah.
So it's like creating a practice of making that then when these ideas do hit you, like, oh, so I had been weaving tapestry, little bits here and there, little pictures, and then that idea took hold of me of waves a couple of years ago. It was like, okay, I think I can step into that. So in other words, the step or the leap to actually doing the idea that comes to you isn't so great.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And even when you have an idea, they tend to be huge. We tend to just have, oh, I want to do this big, great thing. And if you can at all bring it down, it was like, okay, just 3 inch by 3 inch. Same image every time, just with shifts in basic shapes, right. Shifts in color. This is all my brain. It's all my brain could handle, really.
Right.
It was just something very simple.
And I think, that's really important that we as creators kind of, we do think so big sometimes, and to bring it down. And then it could evolve, from there, it could be whatever, or that's its own thing. But it does feel overwhelming, I'm sure, sometimes I've got this idea, what steps do I need to take? And like you said, to make it a practice of, especially an enjoyable one where you're enjoying it and it's not forced, it just becomes second nature. And like you said, starting small and just take it with you, have that instead, choose this instead of the phone, or choose whatever. And it'll build, that the more you're practicing it, and it just keeps growing. And I think that's amazing, advice that we all could take to heart, that this could be how we just manage things, not stressing so much about it. And I love that. So as you've been working on tapestry and then fiber, before that drawing and creating, has there been any moment where it's something that you're just like, I need beyond like a break, but what if I tried, ceramics, something completely different? Because it sounds like, this has kind of stepped into this space for you. But have you ever just leapt into something else?
Well, it might be thought of as similar, but I certainly have jumped into ceramics on a small.
Oh, funny.
I just love making, and so friends that I have who maybe their thing. They're a potter.
Yes.
They'll invite me to come and make some things in their studio. I made buttons for all the knitted garments that I, made vessels, a yarn bowl, so.
Right.
But embroidery really was something on fabric collage with embroidery that I had a deep dive into for a few years, alongside of all the other things. I mean, I'm just crazy. I've sometimes said maybe I have creative ADHD or something.
Of course. Well, a lot of creatives tend to do that. You have that for sure. It's just they see something and it's inspiring to them and they're going to try.
Yes. And one thing kind of tickles your fancy for another. And anyway, that is certainly one. I'm trying to think if there have been others. I don't know. I enjoy it all. When I was a child, I loved playing violin. My parents had given me violin lessons when I was like 4.
Oh, wow.
Suzuki violin. Played all through middle school, but I was also a dancer.
Oh,
and
wow.
so I did ballet for many years through college. There was just our family was a very creative family, and I didn't realize that was anything different. I thought that was normal.
Do you see those things about your past, the violin and dancing, does that come into play still with your art today? Do you feel like any of that kind of shines through? Are you listening to violin music? Like that kind of thing.
I listen to classical music. I love to go to concerts, symphonies. All 3 of our children love music and have been involved in choirs and choruses through college. And, one of them even still now in a community choir. We love to go to those. My husband is a beautiful singer, songwriter, guitarist, so it's certainly all still there. I don't really dance anymore.
In your own way, with your hands.
In my own way, in the kitchen when nobody's, But I think it all is part of the same wonderful bucket of just making things. I think we are, as human beings, creators. Mm-hmm. Every single person is. Yeah. It just looks different.
Absolutely. And so at the end of the day, you're creating for you, and then it has blossomed into, you have yarn and you'll be able to sell it on Etsy and your shows. Did you imagine this coming from loving and being creative in this world? Or, is this, like now I've got this business plan and I'm going to sell and do all the, how has that been for you?
I've often thought, man, I think I can make so many different things. The only thing I can't make is a consistent art career. And by that I mean, artists that I see who have been professional painters for the length of their lives, sold enough to live on, to make, a living wage. Tapestry weavers who have woven all their lives. I, on the other hand, see, even though I've tried, I've sold work in galleries and small spaces and little exhibits here and there, but it's not been something that I feel like I've been able to sustain. It's been hard with, raising 3 children and then caring for parents in their older years. And now we have grandkids coming along, and there's so much of life I want to be present for that doesn't allow for me to sit in front of my tapestry loom and weave all day long.
There's something about that, where the balance of everything, you see a beautiful ice skater that is making, it just looks so easy, but you look at all of the sacrifices sometimes that are made to have that career, I suppose. But the fact that, the balance of life and experiencing life, I think is just as valuable as the end product of creating that piece to sell. And I think that is important for those who feel like they could just do this all day, every day. There's that, true thing about, burnout. It will happen. It'll get you. And, you have to take a break and you have to kind of weave in the pauses in your life.
Yes, yes. So, it's in everything, isn't it?
Yes.
And, I kind of had a bit of an aha moment. Well, I've had several aha moments, but they've typically come at the hands of really hard things happening in my life. And one of them was 12 years ago, I landed in the hospital with ulcerative colitis that had gone viral.
Oh, man.
Basically. And the ensuing surgeries after that. And I remember being at the beach with my husband's family and thinking, all these efforts at having a career in art, I wonder if really what I want is an artful life. And that has stuck with me. I still have this, gosh, wouldn't it be great to, have a 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 making all day long and, going out and exhibiting my tapestries or what have you. But I think really what I love that I do have is this weaving of creativity in and around and through everything in my life. And, it causes you to pause when you're thinking about, I could really jump into marketing this. I could really spend the time to sell these works, but I'd rather make with that time. So you just have to bring some wisdom to what is it I really want.
Right. There's so many different directions people can go, and so much, advice that you're given of you could do this, but it's your life at the end of the day. How do you want to spend those moments, those hours, those years, but yet still find the reward in, teaching or the things you do sell or that's just a perk, that could be a bonus. So for those who are feeling like they love to create, but they don't want that bogged down feeling of everything, they don't have to, and that is really important, that it doesn't always have to become this career or this
Yes.
one-way path.
I think there's is it Ian McKellen? There's a clip of him that's going around on Instagram or Facebook where he's speaking to people and he's saying, just being creative, just for the reason of being creative, is of such value to you as a person. Right. Don't think, will this sell? Don't think. It's a wonderful little clip you've probably seen. And then John Cleese also has some wonderful things to say. There are some clips of him, speaking about this book that he wrote on creativity. But last year, I can get so bogged down in the seriousness of being an artist,
Right.
And in the work of an artist, and I need to be doing this, and need to be doing that. And he's just like, have fun.
Right.
Make it lighthearted. And I actually, Becky, feel like I get on a whole lot better with my making self or with whatever it is if I'm just having fun, if I can keep it light.
Take out the audience and keep it for you, and then that will, after the fact, like your wave series, that then comes to light later. But in that moment, it's yours. It's for you, and I think the best work comes from that. And I think those are great ideas. Wow. Yeah. So I guess to summarize, I think we've kind of touched on it, but what is success then for you as an artist?
Perhaps if I thought about it longer, I could come up with something more eloquent. But success for me, I feel really internally jazzed when I have set aside time to make something that I'm excited about, whether it's going to go out in the world or not. But then that little extra, if someone is interested and I get to share it with them and they seem like, I've never seen it that way, that is success. I mean, that is like
the connection.
Yeah. Or if they walk away going, I've got to do that. I need to learn to weave. I've got to learn to draw. If they have a spark that comes from something I've made or that I've shared or, written or whatever it is, that's success. It's not so much in the dollar, although when people do spend their hard-earned money that is getting harder and harder to part with these days on a piece that you've made, it's because it's connected with them in some way. And I'm grateful for that. But really, I think the success I feel is like, oh, I got to make today, and if it touches somebody else or speaks to them in some way, that feels like success.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for being on the show. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share about anything?
I think it would be, you are a maker. You just are. You're a human being, and you're made with that creativity woven into the fabric of your being. And if you're having desires to paint, or desires to weave, or desires to write, or whatever it is, just do it. Just do it. Not because, there doesn't have to be any other reason other than you were made to make. And it will bring so much to your life. It will bring an ability to see through the dark times. It will bring joy. It will bring connection to others, connection to your own self.
Right.
It will bring solace. It will bring just a sweetness and fun to life that I don't think anything else does.
Yeah, that's perfect for them and me. And then, so I will put in the show notes where people can find you. But as if they're just listening, what's the main place that they should look for you?
I think the main place I camp out on is Instagram. And I do have 2 Instagrams, but the main one is Jen Pedwards. Now, I joined Instagram back many moons ago when we weren't really thinking about our handle or whatever that's called. So it's JENP Edwards. And then I have another one for drawing that I don't visit too much, even though I probably draw more than anything, but it's Jen Ped Draws. Jen P EDRAWS, yeah. But I also have a Substack that I write and post, images of what I'm working on. I do love that platform, but it gets set aside when I'm in a making frenzy.
There's only so many hours to be able to put everything out there, and it's so hard. Oh.
And thankfully, Instagram will take your post straight to Facebook.
Yes, that is true.
I am on Facebook, and I used to have a site. It's still up and running. It's called Artful Life on Facebook, but I don't tend to post there quite as often specifically. It goes to my personal Facebook page, and folks are welcome to follow there if they want to. But.
Wonderful. Okay, and like I said, I'll put that in the show notes so people can grab that as well. I want to thank you again. This was wonderful to have you and just kind of dive into the tapestry, the fiber, and your journey. That's the whole point, and I loved it. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Becky. I was excited to get that message from you and delighted to be able to talk with you.
And I want to thank our listeners again for joining us. If you enjoyed the podcast and found it valuable, please share it with others so we can reach people who might like a bit of inspiration on their own creative journey. I'm Becky Garish, and until next time, happy creating.
Hey there, creative minds. Are you ready for the next burst of inspiration? Make sure to subscribe to the Origins of Creativity podcast in your favorite podcast app for all our latest episodes. Visit booklandmedia.com/podcast for show details, links to connect with us, and so much more. This has been the Origins of Creativity podcast, where inspiration meets imagination.